looks like out of the blue some chocolates appeared on the altar. I don't know who brought them. We're definitely, from our own side, trying for people not to bring these things. So, but if they appear, they appear. Maybe they manifested out of the blue, I don't know. But anyway, all this, then also before or after lunch, somebody, you can know, you're the, who's known? Omna is the altar keeper, isn't it? No? Leora is the altar keeper, so you can, or I will bring it up to the model. All eatables you can either eat here or take home. It's fine, share it with others. Okay, so we'll do a short, long, whatever, reflection on really appreciating the situation, like, you know, like Yael reacted now. It's normal, or it's good. This is how I reacted. When I heard about karma, I thought like, oh shit, I'm going to end up in the hells. Then they talked about purification, so that's what I said. Then I signed up for a 3-month retreat. So, which are also, you know, people say, well, your choices, are they because karma also? Yeah, the choices, we can make choice, but not limited, unlimited choice. We can make a choice, but we also need to have created the causes to make this choice. Like the causes outside conditions, a 3-month retreat has to happen. Inner conditions, I need to have the possibility to participate, because it was in India. If I would have had small children, or I don't know what, or like a job that I had to go back to, then I could not have signed up. I didn't have any of this, so I could stay. I had enough financial means also to support myself for almost 20 years in India without working. So, so these are also, this is also conditions that through my actions I have created them. Still, but I could have chosen not to do it. Yeah, so there is a choice, not an unlimited choice. The same way, you go to an Italian restaurant, you have the choice between spaghettis and pizzas and calamari, so I don't know what, and but you don't have the choice of eating chow mein, for example, because it's not on the menu. Yeah. I have the choice to speak to you in a few languages, because I learned those languages, but I don't have the choice to speak to you either in Russian or Hebrew or Tibetan, because I didn't create that choice. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it is, in a way, when it's fatalistic, so everything is fixed. Not really. It's like, it has a cause. Why things happen to us, it has a cause. That our mind stream, not me, this is another thing. Because we have a feeling of an inherently existing I that we take to our next life. Well, if that would be the case, we would remember who we were last life. But it feels like that. It feels like I, who is sitting in here, will be in the body of an insect. That, or in the body of a hell being or whatever. You will have a different I. Because that I that seems to exist in here does not exist the way that it appears. That is added. That's an addition by a deluded mind, by a confused mind, which creates all the problems, which separates us from others, which makes me feel my happiness is more important than, for example, Chaya's happiness, when it becomes tight. You know, if I have what I need, then of course Chaya's happiness is also included. But if I start lacking, I am not sure if I recognize that Chaya's instinctively, that Chaya's happiness is just as important as mine. And then this ego kind of comes and starts. So we have different I's or different egos. We have a general ego that when you sit, you know who you are. That's okay. Even the Buddha has that I. Yeah, he knows who he or she knows who he or she is. Yeah, but then we have an added one, an inherently existing, separate, existing from its own side, autonomous. What else words do we have for that thing? Huh?
Objectively.
Objectively existing from its own side. I, which seems to be the owner of the body and the mind. Yeah, something more than just body and mind. Yeah, and that one is projected by what is called ignorance or wrong views or delusion or confusion or whatever. That's just the projection, because if you try to find it, you cannot find it anymore. And this one I, this is the one who is always involved when it comes down to unethical conduct. Because then it's me and them. Whereas if that general I comes, there is a me, yeah, of course, but then there's also us. It's not so much me and them anymore, it is us. And us as like us, not Jews and non-Jews and black people and white people, Buddhists, and men and women, but us as suffering sentient beings who want to be happy and who don't want to suffer. A bit like this. Yeah? So it's a complicated story, this whole thing. It's a long path, but even though it's the same, even though it's a long path, it's not that from a totally deluded state and suffering state, you practice, nothing changes, and one day you are enlightened. It's as you move along this path, then things change already. It's like when you try to become a millionaire and you start saving money, your amount of money becomes more and more and more and more. It's not that from zero you go at one point to a million. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So people ask me sometimes, well, what if there is no such thing as full awakening? I said, I don't care, really. I can see what the path is giving me already now, then that's good enough for me. Like, for example, I was able to dissolve the aversion towards my mother because of these methods. Wow, that was a big step. It was great. It was good for me, definitely. Yeah. So.
And also for her, probably.
Yeah, she probably didn't even notice it. So it's like, I don't know. But definitely for me, it was a big thing. And don't forget, you're doing these practices for you. Firstly, that's always. First, we have to know to look after ourselves. So the lowest level of abstaining from negative action is for our own benefit. And then you start for the benefit of others in order not to harm them. Okay.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
The semi-God and the God brains.
Yeah.
It's actually something that people are getting there after they have been accumulating very good energy in the human realm, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like a punishment.
Also, well,
there,
again, it's not a punishment, it's a consequence.
okay, but there they cannot accumulate good energy.
No, because usually the demigods are just jealous of the gods who have everything. Everything is very easy for them, and and the others, they do have some power, but because of their jealousy, they're not enjoying what they have, and so they're fighting the god realm. So no, in general, you don't accumulate positive energy there, because the motivation is to have deeper pleasures.
Yeah, so although it's higher than the human realm, then
It's higher in terms of less difficulties while you live, and deeper pleasure, more refined pleasures. Probably if the ones in those upper realms, they see what we find pleasure in, then they must feel like we, when we go to Goa. And anybody has been to Goa? No? Yeah? The toilets in Goa, do you remember? Maybe they don't exist anymore, I don't know. It's like a platform, your caca falls down, and it's open, and the pigs underneath come and eat it with a lot of pleasure. So look at your faces now. So that's how, when the gods see how we find, at what we find pleasure, they probably go like, ooh. Because their pleasures are not so much material, it's more the joy and the pleasure that comes from mental quietude, from mental absorption.
So how do we avoid higher realms if I want precious human rebirth? We know how to avoid lower realms.
Good question. Motivation. When you take refuge, I take refuge until I'm enlightened. I'm doing this because I want to attain enlightenment, not because I want to feel well now. Why do I want to attain enlightenment? For the benefit of all sentient beings. That's a formula that Buddhists say before every practice. Then it can be just blah, 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 and the mind is totally somewhere else. But it can also be a heartfelt thing, and it makes a habit in the mind to think like that. Or as I said yesterday, may I never be separated from the two bodhicittas. That's it. And they say, it is said that the human realm is the best because we have some pains, we see that there is suffering, Yeah, and but also the suffering is not as big as in the lower states. So that you can practice. Yeah. So like in the middle level, you learn that to avoid the upper states, that you're even afraid of the upper states when you turn away from samsaric life altogether and you're looking for liberation from it. So by studying, by knowing, by taking and generating your motivation, why am I doing this practice? You see, we also say when we ask lamas, when we see these people in Switzerland who are very, very rich, have a lot of comfort, they're very kind. I'm not saying they're nasty people. But all they do is spend their money. So we say, how come they must have accumulated so much positive energy through the practice that they have all these very good conditions to practice, they have zero interest. And then they say, because when they accumulated this positive energy, it was in order to have comfort. And that's it, that's the result. Now they have the comfort. So this is why your motivation, why you're doing things is very important. It's crucial where the karmic imprints that you are creating, where they will be guiding you. Yeah? Okay? So, but again, fear, like this panicky fear, is no good, it won't help. Like,
which fear is good?
Huh?
Which fear is good?
Which fear is good? A reasonable fear. Like the reasonable fear when I see, I don't know, when I see a plug or when I see like wires hanging down, is that fear knowing that if I touch it, it will hurt? Is it fear? It's the fear that is preventing me from touching it. We could call it fear, but it's a healthy fear. But it's also a wisdom.
As well as don't make non-virtuous actions.
Huh?
I mean, as well, you don't make negative actions.
It's out of wisdom. It's out of wisdom because you know the consequences. But I'm talking about, again, the fear would come when we have this view that somebody kind of is punishing me, somebody from outside. There is nobody there. And that with the karma, when we talk about karma, that's the most common view. It's very difficult to get rid of that idea that there is a Buddha or somebody there that, is rewarding me or is punishing me. Yeah, so that is, it's not it. This is our own mind who is creating the negative imprints and can also undo the negative imprints and can create virtue.
I want to say we have to scale to fall into low yangs, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is why I prefer to work with an example. Would you call that fear that I'm not touching those wires? I would call it fear. But sometimes people, the word fear is so heavy that people, they freeze. Yeah? So I see the wires, I'm not panicking. These wires are not in my mind all the time. I mustn't touch them, I mustn't touch them, I mustn't touch them. It's not like this. But it's some underlying, I would call this fear, who prevents me from touching them. That I'm not even tempted. But then if the fear is like panic, it's terrible, these wires are hanging down, I might touch them and all this, then it prevents me from leading a happy life. And the whole thing about this is why we're doing the meditation, again, appreciating the existence that we're in, leaving aside for a moment all the negative things that are bothering us, but really starting to appreciate, because then you make good use of it. When this afternoon we talk about the difficulty of getting it and what the causes are, then we start to see, I don't want to waste it. They kind of say, not using your precious human rebirth in order to create more positive karma, so for liberation, enlightenment, or just good rebirth, is like cooking a very good meal, putting a lot of effort into it in past lives, and then throwing the meal away. you know, or not using it for what it's for. Yeah, that it's a bit of a shame. The problem is that we don't remember having made so much effort so that we have created that situation. If we would remember, yeah, when you acquire something that you had to make a lot of effort, then you really appreciate it. So there again, we just have to trust the Buddha, because the causes for having this body, we did not create in this life. This is impossible, because otherwise we wouldn't have this body. Yeah? If I want to go to India, the causes to be able to enter, I have to make them the visa before I go to India. I cannot create the causes for a human life in this life when I'm human, but I can create the causes for future human lives, for example. Okay? It's the Buddhist view. So, for me it helps. I find this view very helpful. You see, I was always angry about injustice in the world. I thought, like, I can't believe it, that, you know, so unjust. And where did the anger go? To the people that were causing the injustice? You think? They didn't know. They didn't even know there was this one young woman in Switzerland who was angry at them. It was, at my time, it was the Vietnam War, you know, demonstrating. So with a lot of aggression, it was just a way to get the aggression out, smashing people's windows in Switzerland and in Italy, who have nothing to do with the whole thing. You know, I don't know if you know the Bader Meinhof group.
Yes.
They were my idols when I was young. Good thing I was born in Switzerland and not in Germany. I don't know if I wouldn't have joined them. Now, of course, not. You know, now I get frightened of if they're terrorists. They were, in my eyes, good terrorists. Why? Because they were catching all these ancient Nazis who were in a very high post and then were killing them. That's what they were doing, because they said, this is not right, you know. They were hiding what they did in the past, and now they have these very high jobs and lots of salary and are very rich. They should be punished, so they were kidnapping them, killing them. But also killing the driver sometimes, you know. So, but I thought it's a good thing what they're doing there, because these Nazis, they're terrible way to get rid of them. I mean, this was my view, but it also comes out of having a lot of aggression and not knowing what to do with the aggression. So anyway, I'm happy I was not born in Germany, or in Italy. I have a friend still now who was part of that group in Italy, the Red Army fraction. She also is not shooting anymore. So she's making movies about that time, very touching movies actually. So they were students, they were intelligent people, they were not violent people, you know, just they had ideals. This is why they were doing it. They wanted to have a more just society. So anyway, how did we get to bottom line? So then when I heard about this anger against injustice, when I heard about this law of cause and effect, I kind of liked to hear it, because I thought, well, we do have a possibility. Some people, very, very limited possibility to change something, because the conditions are not there, be neither inner nor outer. Yeah? But everybody does have the possibility to change something. So I stopped feeling like the victim, and also was able then, and this is what I already said yesterday, which is a very nice thing, that instead of getting angry at the aggressor, you can include the aggressor in the compassion by thinking, wow, he is creating future suffering for himself, or she. Now, not ha 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 ha, he will be punished by his own karma. Not like this, but really having the compassion. See, that person at one point will be the victim. And then you don't get so angry, and then maybe we can make a change. Who knows? Because with anger and aggression, I don't think we can make much change. People might be afraid of us. You know, when you force somebody to do something with anger and aggression, then they're afraid. So they might be afraid, they stop. But the moment you become weak, they turn around and then you get it back. It's usually what happens. Yeah. You can only destroy your enemies by making them your friends. It's the only way. But what if they don't want? Then they don't want, but at least you can stop not wanting to want. You can still feel love and compassion, but it's a very, very high goal. But again, we do have examples that it's possible. Whom? Living examples that this is possible. That you don't have to hate the people who harm you. Huh?
Mandela, but he's not alive.
Nelson Mandela, for example. Would you call him a happy or an unhappy person? Would you call him a happy or an unhappy person? Happy person. Could he serve as an inspiration for us? That we say, I want to have this kind of mind. But I didn't know him personally. But people that maybe you know personally. The Tibetans. You know, Gachin Rinpoche, the first time he was in Israel, he sat down on the throne. And it was so impressive. He sat down and he said, oh, hello, my name is Gachin. And I was imprisoned by the Chinese army for 17 years, but it was my karma. But now it's finished. Now I'm fine. I'm out of prison. No need to suffer anymore.
Okay, also Holocaust survivors, not many
Also
of
them.
them, they live
Also
their lives
them,
and
yeah.
they go to, many of them go to Germany.
Yes.
And
So
they
this is
practice-
what we should listen to, and this is what we
Right.
should take as an inspiration. You know? People are able to let go. Yeah? Or like this Ringo Tulku who was asked, you know, are you so realized that you're always happy? Kind of, you also lost your country. He said, yeah, I'm not realized, but I'm happy because why? Everybody's nice to me. Why should I not be happy? So like that. Huh?
I'm reading his book, so
Oh, so you know him. Oh, have you ever met him? He is so really beautiful. I mean, it's such a pleasure to listen to him. It's probably a pleasure to read his book. Yeah. Anyway, you know, we were lucky enough that these people come to places like Switzerland where the interest in really practicing is quite small because people are so well. Yeah. He was talking in front of maybe 30 people. 2 evenings. Without kind of going, why are there so few people? I came all the way from, I don't know, we came from Darjeeling, I think. Yeah.
You
So
should come to Israel.
invite him. Try to invite him. And he speaks very good English, so this is why. And he's so simple and he's so lovable. You know. So these
What's his name?
Ringo Tulku. So these people are my inspiration. So having contact with them, then there is this wish, you know, I want to become like them. And then look, how did they become like that? And then, by practicing these methods. This is how they became like that. So even big calamity happened, like their country was taken away. Some of them were tortured in prison. And they're high lamas, you know, like they had high status, noble aristocrats put into prison by the Chinese army. No hatred. No hatred. For me, that is inspiring. I think that is what attracted me to Tibetan Buddhism. When I read the book of the Dalai Lama, My Land of My and My People, how he tells how he lost his country, and there's absolutely no hatred. So me as a young person, you know, in the streets and Body Meinhof and Red Fraction Army and blah 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 and all this with a lot of aggression, I thought like, wow, we can also be done that way. And I was very, very inspired. And I said, I want to find out what this is all about, what they do. Okay, so it's a short meditation and appreciation of the precious human rebirth that we all have at the moment. It can end tonight when you go home. Who knows? Not by dying, but by not having the time and the leisure anymore to practice because you're so taken by your daily life. You know? Or you might lose interest or whatever. We don't get it at birth. Okay. So, once you're settled, Maybe just to start with the idea, wow, I'm so fortunate. And just see what that does to you. If some voice from behind comes, what are you saying? You're crazy, you're not. You have this and this and this problem. Then look what happens when you look at that voice, when you listen to that voice, how you feel. See, the situation is the same in both cases. You are sitting in that gompa. Nobody's threatening you. Nobody wants anything from you. But your state of mind can change very drastically. Try to play around with this a little bit and look at your sensations in your heart, in your chest. One, you think, wow, I'm so fortunate. Because we are. We don't have to fight for food. We don't have to fight for drink. It might come, but at the moment we're not. We're still alive. We have interest and contact to these methods. We are a bit too impatient and we forget that this is just a training. But we can become more patient by repeating, this is just a training. Nobody's asking me to be able to do these things yet. No pressure. I mean, just hearing about this law of cause and effect, showing us that we have choices that we can make, or that we're responsible for our own happiness. And when this sinks in and we start to understand this, this is so rare and it's so precious. Whatever the mind is familiar with, this is what it will do. So we can make the mind familiar with love, compassion, and wisdom. And the potential to be open and loving, or this Buddha nature as it is called sometimes, we can never lose it because it is our nature. If that's too religious or if that is too complicated, we can think everybody has the possibility or the potential to be happy. Everybody. Everybody also has the potential to suffer, but we're not going there now. Maybe as an experiment, try to take a situation from the past that made you upset, not a very big one, that made you upset, and it's still, just thinking about the situation, you still feel some tension in your heart. Either you've been hurt or somebody else hurt you. If you don't find anything, then that's okay. Don't cook up anything. And really something from the past, something that is finished. And then you tell yourself, I have the possibility to let go, to just let it be, to keep the memory, but to let the tension go. And you breathe into it. you open up, you become wide and spacious, or I have the choice to keep holding on to it. Just to expose the mind to